All right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Um, my name is Asher. I'm one of the managers with StudyMind. We're joined here by one of our most experienced tutors, Bailey, who's been teaching with us for the last 4 or 5 years, and he is one of the most experienced tutors we have. And he will be going through a little bit of a guide on how to apply strategically to medical schools today. We will have a dentistry webinar series. If any of you are applying for dentistry, that will hopefully be starting next week. Today we will be going over undergraduate applications. So today's outline is a little bit about how to apply strategically, what do we mean by strategic applications, and a few case studies on students. Next week we will go over graduate entry medicine. We'll go over a little bit about gap years, resits, etc. But today is a quick overview and a little bit about specific universities and the changes made to UCAT this year. For veterinary science, we have a different one planned altogether because for medicine and dentistry, there is a UCAT exam, which is heavily considered for most universities. So that is something we'll go over, whereas veterinary science does not typically have that. So we will be going over that as a separate series of webinars. I'm going to hand it over to you, Bailey, if that's fine, if you're happy to introduce yourself and take it from here, if that's all right. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much, Ashir. Hi, I'm Bailey. I'm a fourth year medic at the University of Leicester. And I am one of StudyMind's most experienced tutors, which is surprising of all things. And we'll be talking about how to apply strategically, which is quite a common pitfall in applications, generally speaking. Well, it is what it says it is on the tin, to apply with a thought in mind. Especially with medicine,
Listen.
we only get.
Listen to me, it's a good news.
Sorry, I'm just going to mute everyone. Then when we get to the Q&A section, we'll unmute, depending on who we ask questions to. Sorry for that, Bailey.
That's absolutely fine. I forgot what I was again. Yeah, so we have to apply with a thought in mind and a goal, really, which is to maximize the amount of offers you'll get. As we only get 4 choices for medical school, it is more pertinent than in other subjects like maths or English, where you generally will have 5 options. Okay, plus or minus anything on if you decide to go through clearing. Whereas medicine, he does go into clearing, but it's few and far between. So that's me. I've already said I'm a fourth year medic at Leicester. 4 years with StudyMind. Is there anything else that is interesting? I don't think there is much else that's interesting about me as such. So studying medicine in 2026. Now, I got into medical school in 2021. So we are talking about 5 years ago. But we're generally ranked, so this is for the University of Hertfordshire, which is a brand new medical school. There are a lot of newer ones popping up, which I would suggest that everyone take a little look at.
Just a quick one about this one, Bailey, for everyone. So there are lots of new medical schools opening, and University of Hertfordshire is one of the new ones that not many students know about. The reason we're bringing up some of these universities is because there's quite a few of you who may not have scored the best on the UCAT, or potentially there can be scores which get a bit lower at times in certain years, and that's absolutely fine. A big part of strategic applications is working with the scores that you have, and some of these medical schools, such as the new ones, they don't really have a fixed UCAT cutoff, and generally people with maybe really high scores will avoid them because of uncertainty. The medical schools themselves aren't bad, and there's nothing that's going to have a huge impact on. They're all governed by the GMC, and you will end up getting a job as a doctor. It's just that they don't have a full license, and all of them do tend to end up getting full licenses or have a contingency plan in place. So it's good to consider some of these. We don't have any statistics as how they use the UCAT because it's their first year. But we thought we'd bring this one up. You can scan that QR code to explore a little bit more about this university. But there are a few others like Bangor. There is also, for graduates, there's Chester, Worcester as well. But that's just a quick introduction to some of these new ones. So do keep your mind open and look at any new courses too. Don't be too worried about them in terms of how they'll affect you as a doctor, because all medical schools start somewhere. and you still have equal chances if you get into one of these. I'll pass it back to you, Bailey.
Yeah, I mean, another point on medical schools, while they might not have all of their official statistics published yet, a good place to look is generally on something like the National Student Survey. So they're run every year, and it's from a collection of the students within that university, a lot of time even in medical schools, and they will be ranked and they'll be spoken about based upon things that actually matter. So how happy people are with their placements, which for me as a placements-based student is quite important. The same things like clinical contact, preparedness in your exams, and all those other factors. So it is not as simple when you're looking at a medical school as what one scores top of the league table, because often what scores at top of a league table isn't, I'm not going to say it's not the best, because it may well be, but it might not be the best for you. So I'm hoping that we have everyone could drop a little line into the chat. What does everyone think is the most important factor when selecting a medical school? So just going to give everyone about 30 more seconds just to get themselves an idea in. So the answer is it really does depend, to be honest. It depends on what university you're applying to, depends upon what the most important thing is. So, and the most important thing for you to do is to prioritize what you have good, essentially. So there are things in here that are within your control right now, and there are things that are unfortunately outside of our control. So things that are not inside our control would be your GCSE results, because for all of you, I'm assuming you're all in either year 12 or going into year 13. So GCSEs have been done and dusted. Again, you've all likely sat the UCAT this year already. I think you've got about 3 or 4 weeks left if you haven't. But that is something that's, up in the air. You don't know until it's done. But things you can do something about are your A levels. So you can always have a chat with your teachers. If you've got your predictions and you're not quite happy with them, you can always have a chat with them and talk about, what you can do to improve those grades that you receive, because the predictions are somewhat important. And also your personal statement. And this is one that everyone always overlooks. From somehow, somewhere, someone has been told that, they don't really look at your personal statement and that it doesn't mean anything, which is false. While a lot of medical schools don't score them, they do look at them to a point, because it gives you an insight into a person. So when I look at, because I help mark personal statements and review them, not only in the selection at my medical school, but also for StudyMind, I look for some very specific things, and it's very, very easy to have a bad impression on a personal statement. And it's not about showing that you've done a week's work, you've done 4 weeks work experience in a super specialized area. That doesn't mean anything at that point. It doesn't. But what does matter is what you've taken from that experience. And that's what you need to show in your personal statement. It's not what you've done, it's what you've learned from it. And that is an important skill. And that's reflection. So, and I reflect daily. When I've come home from placement, I might reflect upon things that I've seen. A levels are very important. When I applied back in 2020, I applied. The average was 3 A's. But now you're seeing an increasing number of medical schools asking for A-star AA, 2 A-stars and an A, for that just to be accepted into an interview. So it does really show that you need to be on top of your game, or look at other options, which I will bring in a little bit later on. So this year there has been a change to the UCAT, as I'm sure you're all aware. Unfortunately, abstract reasoning has been removed. And it was due to the fact that it was seen to be easily trainable. Because if you have looked at the average UCAT statistics, which we will show on the next page, you'll notice that the abstract reasoning average was going closer and closer and closer to 800, between 700 and 800, which, as we know, is an incredibly high score anyway, let alone for that to be a consistent measure. So it was removed to make the test more realistic, essentially. But you still have verbal reasoning, decision making, quantitative reasoning, and then you have your situational judgment, which is often people's downfall. Generally you want band 1 and 2. 3, you've still got a chance, but is a borderline situation if there's 2 people that are exactly the same. Someone got band 2, someone got band 3, someone with band 2 is more likely to get the offer. Band 4 is, I'm pretty certain for everyone, is just straight rejection, because the descriptor for band 4 is having a great deal of deviation from the accepted norms in terms of situations. So it's not exactly someone who at that point has the correct amount of judgment to become a doctor. Although SJT, it's learning principles, and it's one of my favorite sections, actually, situational judgment, because it's always one of those, you could argue a number of points either way. So ranking. So in terms of your cutoff score, different universities will use different metrics. Okay, so some universities such as Plymouth or St George's or Newcastle will have a general cutoff score. Okay, and they draw a line in the sand and go, anyone who applies to us and gets under this score, we will not offer an interview. Everyone over will go to the next phase of screening. Okay. Some combine GCSE with UCAT. You can also add A-level into this as well.
Sorry to interrupt, Bailey, just a quick one about situational judgment band scores earlier that Bailey mentioned. So it's an interesting one, because every university, they have their own requirement, and band 4 generally for most universities means an immediate rejection. But there are quite a few universities, although less as years pass on, that don't look at the SJT. So if you get band 3 or 4, it's not the worst case scenario. Most universities don't have a point system for band 1, 2, or 3. Some do, but some of them, as long as you get band 3, you're fine. But band 4, for most universities, is an indicator that you will probably be rejected. But for example, Plymouth is one of those universities that doesn't actually even look at the SJT band score. Although most universities are starting to implement it within their checks. So you can get into a university even if you score poorly on that section. Sorry, I just thought I'd mention that over there. I'll hand it back to you, Bailey, if that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. Some combine your GCSE in terms of a points-based system with your UCAT in terms of points. So you can have a look on their websites, but this is I can roughly remember how Leicester does it. You'll be assigned a set number of points for each grade 7, 8, or 9 that you have, or equivalent if there is still any that are using the A star to G system. So you'll be assigned, I think it's 3 or 4 points for a 9, 3 for an 8, 2 for a 7, or so on and so forth. And your grades will essentially be put into that algorithm to give you a score for your academic points. And then your UCAT is also applied to a score. So on the old spectrum before abstract reasoning was taken out, it would start off at about 2,400. It was normally the bottom. It might have even be 2,350. And then it would convert that into points. So 2,350 was 23.5 points. So, and it would go up in every 50 was a 0.5 increase in points. And you would add those two scores together. And if to meet a threshold point, you would then receive an offer for interview. If you didn't meet that threshold, unfortunately, you wouldn't be progressing to the next step. However, if you already have achieved A levels, so if you're taking a gap year, they will give you points for your A levels. So let's say you get A star AA, they'll give you a number of points for those grades, and then your 5 best GCSEs as opposed to 8 normally. That is a bit complicated, but once you're able to get your head around it, it's not too bad. It's one of those ones where you should work out roughly what you have and then apply. Kings use quite a holistic approach, so they take into consideration pretty much everything. So your personal statement, your UCAT, your GCSEs and A levels. So then they take that into account in order to then decide who they're going to take interviews from. And finally, you have a roles and responsibilities form, which, from what I've come to understand of them, they are like a personal statement, if we're going to put that in quotation marks. Sunderland do them, and I believe Keele does as well, if I'm remembering correctly. And you would complete this form as long as you meet a threshold of their UCAT and all of that. How you complete the form determines how well you do and whether you get an interview or not. Which is quite a nice change from the others, in my opinion. So this is a screenshot from online about the average statistics of the UCAT. I'm sure that all of you are familiar with this data. So you will have a look at roughly what this means. So deciles is first being the bottom 10% to the 9th being the top 10% of all scoring applicants would get this score. Okay, so we have removed your abstract reasoning as it's no longer included, just to give you an indication as to what the scores would look like. So As you can see, generally, the scores are, if we take out abstract reasoning, hovering. So for the top 10%, you're looking at around 2,200, okay, which is about 730 a category, okay, which is fantastic in terms of scoring when we look at the average scores for an applicant, which, you know, it would mean that you have to score considerably above average in sections in order to get that score. I mean, looking at the middle of the road, you know, 1,870 should normally put you at 50%. But it's incredibly.
So sorry to interrupt again, Bailey. There's I think the screen, just so everyone can see it properly, I'll just sort of give out some of the numbers. This has been adjusted for the 2025 scoring system. It used to be out 3,600. So some people that may have seen it last year will see very different results. If you look at the decile ranks, you can see the top 10%, the 9th decile has been increasing every year. So one trend that's going on in the UCAT is that scores are going higher and higher. And that's all across the board, which means that you will tend to see these reflect in the cutoff scores. Now, this is not a definitive thing. Like, you won't necessarily, if the UCAT score is, deciles are much higher one year, it doesn't mean that each university will have a higher cutoff score. It's a little bit dynamic. Generally, though, it will be a more competitive year. So how you want to use this is in conjunction with the cutoff scores from each university, and look at previous year trends. And this is something where on a lot of the websites for each university, you can actually find the admissions policies and you can find the selection process. You can also, if you search something like, for example, Hull York Medical School UCAT statistics or St. George's UCAT statistics, which we'll show you in a moment, you can often find the scoring system on their website and previous year cutoffs. In fact, if you go and search UCL UCAT statistics and look through their main page, they will show you that the cutoff score last year was actually 2,800. And then you'll also see that for Imperial too, which was 3,020. Of course, those are slightly newer universities that are using UCAT. They used to use BMAT, but you're looking at the previous trends, looking at the gap between that cutoff or that scoring system compared to your scores or your UCAT is what we want to do, and making a short list from there. Obviously, some of you may not have scores within the top 10%, and we will also go through, what to do in that case. If you're like in the 4th or 5th decile over here, there are still options. But let's say if your GCSEs are fantastic and you're in the 5th decile, there is still ways around it. And we'll run through a couple of case studies, which Bailey will give his opinion on. This year, the results are not out. I've seen some students ask questions about the results coming out. The preliminary data comes out towards the end of September, so keep an eye on the UCAT Consortium website. And the actual full final data comes out in the first week of October, sorry. So you can change your options depending on what happens, but we'll explore that in a moment. These do not change hugely. Like, if you look at the deciles, they change by 10, 20 points each year, but the upward trend it's upward. So 2024 last year was 2,170. This year it could be 2,190. It could stay the same. It could go lower, but the trend is upwards. Bailey, shall we go on to some of the examples of the universities just to show them maybe perhaps a little bit how to use the system? In fact, actually, should we run through Leicester together? Because I think I have Leicester's document here, which I think would be useful to show everyone. Actually, we'll go through St. George's first. So just about the previous data, if we go back, sorry. How do you use the previous data? So this is a screenshot of St. George's. You can actually find this on the website in the FAQ section, or if you just search UCAT statistics. Now, this is obviously from last year's, like previous year's scoring system, 2,600. That would translate to, if I'm not wrong, around 1,950. Is that right, Bailey? I think. Just off of my head, yeah, around 1,950 this year, so 650 average. So it's generally speaking, St. George is one of the easier London universities. And if you've got something like, let's say this year, 2,100, you're above the cutoff score for every single year. most of the years, should I say, actually. That would give you the indication that this is comfortably an easy university to get an interview for. And if you have band 1, especially a band 2. So that's one way of doing it. That's the UCAT cutoff system. Anyways, we'll go over the Leicester one and the St. George's one specifically in a second, but I'll hand it back to you, Bailey, if that's fine.
Yeah. So yeah, you can always, the previous year's datas are always a good idea to use them. I mean, I would also, if you are using any of the widening participation schemes, if you do meet those criterion, a lot of them will guarantee you an interview of some sort. I would think about double checking if there are any that you can do now, just to try and maximize chances if possible. But I believe a lot of them have to be done earlier on. But it's still something worth looking at. So what if I'm taking a gap year? Well, I took a gap year and I think it was a great period of time. We'll be discussing these more next week when we discuss about how what to do if the worst things were to happen. But gap years are a fantastic thing if you take the right opportunities during them. If you just sit there and play PlayStation for a year, it's not exactly the most productive use. But if you're able to use that time to maximize your application, then they're a fantastic thing to do.
And one key thing to just clarify, it doesn't make any difference to your application. So if you're concerned, I've done my A-levels, I didn't get in last year. If I take a gap year, will they look back at my previous scores? Or will they will it negatively impact me? That is an absolute no. If you redo the UCAT, your previous score is never looked at again. So that will not impact your application whatsoever.
That's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, exactly. I barely took 1 year out. I took 2 years out myself when I applied to medicine. So it generally doesn't have any impact whatsoever. So if you do have the perfect grades, let's say you have 3 A's, you've got 8s and 9s for your GCSEs, and you've got another chance at it, taking gap year is absolutely fine. We'll explore other sort of routes into medicine next week. And, you know, I think there's some students here from international backgrounds here as well. We'll talk a little bit about things like the Canadian school system, the Indian school system, or if you're from the US and you're applying to the UK, we'll explore that in next week's session as well. But some universities, they treat all qualifications differently, and there is a way to find out. So you have to do a lot of research for this kind of thing. Generally, you will be able to find all the information freely available on every website. You can contact the universities as well. I wouldn't contact them too much because I start to get a bit annoyed when a lot of students call in. But you can find all this information for free, and you can often sit down and analyze each bit of it. So that's something that will be quite important for everyone to do once they have the UCAT scores. So I think, Bailey, we're into sort of like the last half an hour. I thought what we'll do is we'll go through a little bit of the scoring system for Leicester.
Yeah,
I thought I'd just help there to give you a little bit of break, if that's fine. So I'm just going to share my screen here for everyone. So this is a document that's just recently been released, and you can actually find a lot of these scoring documents for most universities, and Leicester has changed it very slightly this year. They used to score out of 32 points for UCAT, 32 points for GCSEs. Now, this is one of those things where you need to sit down and find these documents. They have some for Belfast, they have them for Nottingham, and a few other universities, and you can actually work out your deciles. And then there's also the thresholds, which you can find on each of the websites quite easily. So, for example, Bailey, do you remember your UCAT score?
You're stretching my memory a little bit, but I think it was about 2,800, if I remember right. 2,800.
That's fine. We will extrapolate that data. So that was about 700 average. You got about 2,100 there. So let's say 45 out of 48 is what, this actually is not reading off the wrong one there. That would be 42 out of 48 over there for you. Okay. So 42 out of 48. So you're about sort of lost about 6 points there. And then GCSE, let's say you got perfect 8s and 9s. Okay. So you got 48 out of 48 because they score your top 8 over here. That would mean 48 plus 42 is about 90 out of 96. Now, It's a bit confusing because Leicester used to score out of 64, and the highest I've ever seen is 60, around 60.5. I can't recall exactly, but you can find a lot of the thresholds on the website. That is the highest it's ever been before. So generally speaking, Leicester is a competitive university. So if you've got very good academics and you've got a really good UCAT score, you can apply to this university. And in certain years, you will find up here, actually, if you are taking a gap year, and you have achieved all A star, like A star AA, and you've got your GCSEs, you meet the requirements and you're the top 20%, they will guarantee you an interview. So over here, you can see, we will automatically invite you to interview provided you're in your first gap year and met all your minimum GCSE requirements. You meet the minimum A-level grades and within 2 years of your GCSEs, and actually it's the top 5 deciles this year. So gap years are not bad. In some certain instances, they can even help you out, such as with Cardiff, where Cardiff have a scoring system for GCSEs. They'll top up that score with your A-level grades if you don't maximize it there, especially if you have 3 A's. It's really important to analyze each of these documents step by step and make a little bit of a profile for each university and then rank according to that. I think the next one on the slides is the St. George's University. Is that right, Bailey?
Yes, it is. Yes.
So I'll just go over St. George's if that's okay. So I'm just going to show the students how to search for this sort of thing. So it's you want to keep your search terms on Google very, very precise. So you could search something like St. George's UCAT statistics or UCAT cutoff, and try and use the official statistics, not the other websites, because they sometimes don't have all the up-to-date information. It's better looking at all of the information here. For today, we're going to focus on the 5-year undergraduate course because that's the one that most students will be applying to. We'll go over the graduate ones later on. Now you can see over here, it's categorized into home, overseas, and home and overseas for graduates. Now, generally speaking, overseas will be mostly higher in most years, but it can vary, okay? So with Bailey's score that we had as 2,800, he met all the grades. This is a definite, very easy option for him. The reason I'm saying this is if you look at every single score from 2016 to 2025, Bailey is comfortably at least close to 90 to 100 points above at that minimum than the cutoff. So Bailey, would I be correct in thinking you probably put this down as one of your safer choices?
I didn't actually put down St. George's. Funnily enough, I didn't.
Yeah, don't worry about it. If you were to go back now, and let's say you did this cycle just like the other students are, and you had 2,800, is this one you'd consider based on just the ease of it?
Yeah, more than easily. Yeah, he's also about an hour from where I live. So
yeah, so this is one of those things where students get really, really worried about, like, okay, my score is only 100 points above, like, but if every single year you have been above the cutoff, most likely, we're working off chances and probability here, that you'll be better off. There's always a small chance that this could jump up to 2,810, and that can happen at times. But we got to work off the information we have. So you can rank universities based on that information. And I'll show you another one that is actually very easy. It's Plymouth for students. Now, again, this is one of those which people historically apply to because it's very easy and very easy cutoffs. But then if you look at 2023 and 2022, it jumped up suddenly. I suspect that might have had a lot of backlog of people taking gap years and people with deferred entries, which may have played a part. However, that's not confirmed.
Yeah, I remember from when I applied my second time round, I did get a rejection from them because the grade requirements changed. So that's why their statistics maybe have dropped slightly. Because they upped it without saying anything from 3 A's to A star AA when they were initially screening.
Yeah. So they do change things every year, which is very important to do this research. And some universities still haven't released the last year's admissions data. You have to keep checking like this year as well. Often it's hidden away in most people in the website, so you have to look for a few hours at times, and you can find it. So if you look over here, I've just searched something called Belfast Scoring System 2026. You put in medicine to be a little bit more specific, but you will often find a PDF document, something that's up to date for this admission policy. So this is the right way to look for that information and then sit down and make that judgment over here. Now, as you can see, this is another example. they've changed the scoring system again this year. It used to be out of 6 actually previous years, now it's out of 9. So it's according to each decile. So they're weighing the UCAT a little bit more this year. I suspect there's a lot of changes this year because of abstract reasoning being taken out. But reading all of this is quite important. Like Bailey said, even with the mitigating circumstances, or even with your widening participation, there are a lot of students who have unique circumstances. So exploring each of those is very important. So we'll use Bailey's example again here for this particular university, 2,800 on the UCAT. And the year that, let's say, Bailey is applying this year, he's probably going to be an 8, just off the top of my head, because they've translated, he comes into like the 8th decile here. So 8 out of 9 for the UCAT. And then finally, in the GCSEs, they do score that. So the scoring system is a bit unique here, where they prefer people with 9s. So let's say Bailey has, we'll make your grades up here. It's your best 9 subjects. We'll say you have 8 7s and 1, sorry, we'll say, yeah, you have 8 7s and 1 9, okay? So your score will be 24, sorry, 3 times 8 is 24. Yes, that's correct. And then you've got 1 9, so that make you about 28 there. 28 plus 8, which was from his, the 8 is from his UCAT score over here, would make 36. So if we look at the overall score, it's 36. Now, if you look at this table here, most years he is eligible for an interview, but there are some years where he's just borderline and below the actual requirement. So this is one of those universities which become a bit risky. And you can see how sometimes if his grades were maybe all 8s and 9s, this would have been a perfect one to apply to. So even if you've scored in the top 8, sort of 8th or 9th decile, doesn't necessarily mean that you're an advantage, because then there's some universities will weigh the GCSEs a lot more. You just have to find the ones that work to your advantage here. So we'll go through one more before we go through the case study, if that's fine. We might not get enough time for the second case study. But there is one for, again, if you search for Exeter, you will find their admissions data as well. So I'm just going to pull up a Word document that shows theirs. So just a second. And again, you can find this document quite easily by searching up the Exeter admissions policy. They're a little bit different now. So they look at your predicted grades, and you'll see that there are 4 categories of students, split up into predicted grades, achieved grades, and widening participation or non-widening participation. So if you're predicted 3 A stars and you are in the top 10 percentile, you get 90 points. Again, there's no fixed threshold. Generally, they say you can find a lot of this data as well on the website, or you can dig for it on Freedom of Information Act websites as well. But generally, if you're in this category, you're quite safe. The widening participation, a lot of students who are applying with non-widening participation get a bit worried when they also see that widening participation gets more points. One thing to highlight here, and I think Bailey will agree with me on this, is that very few students actually do get the widening participation requirements, about 10 to 20% of students, and it's to even the playing field, because a lot of those students may not actually have those A star grades. So widening participation actually just makes it a little bit more even. So even if you are somebody who gets 2 A stars and an A and you're in the 9th decile, you still might be better off than most students who have the widening participation points anyways. Do you agree with that, Bailey?
Yeah, no, I do completely agree with it. I mean, you know, widening participation is a fantastic thing, but sometimes it doesn't always break those barriers down that it always should do.
Yeah. And so what I mean to say is that it's not something, if you are who is non-widening participation, should be worried of necessarily. Every university has a degree of widening participation. You will mostly be, look, if you are in this category, then compare yourself to other students who are in this category. This category is often considered its own as well. So there is not too much to worry about. But we've just shown about 3 or 4 examples there of how universities score you. So what we're going to do is we're going to really quickly go over some case studies, if that's fine, Bailey. I think we'll go through the first one, if that's fine, to just show the students. And then next week, we'll go through a tricky application, I think, for everyone, like where somebody scored really badly. And
just give us a second, just to just give me a moment.
So I'll leave that for you to just sort of talk through if that's fine.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
And then also a little bit about work experience might be good as well. Like I think you touched on it before, like why we actually do it and how is it going to benefit you, and we can talk a little bit about how it helps somebody in the interviews.
Yeah,
Anyways, I'll leave it with you, Bailey, if that's fine.
that's perfect. So this is our first case study. So grades has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 9s, 3 8s, and 2 a 7 and a 6. So grades overall pretty good. Considering most medical schools take either your top 8 or 9, generally if they take GCSEs. So in the grand scheme of things, the student's doing quite well in their GCSEs. A levels, they're predicted, so he's got 2 A stars and an A, so A level predicted grades are pretty good. So if we have a look at their UCAT scores, so based upon this year, so they have got a total of 2,100 over out of a possible 2,700. So they've done really, really well, as we remember back from our table earlier.
Slight error there when I think I put this in slide. That should be 85th percentile, roughly, not 75th.
Yeah,
So
I twigged that.
Yeah.
And they got top band SJT. So this person is incredibly happy. So, and work experience, which is always an important thing to look at. They've got quite a variety. So they've got a week in GP, which is fantastic. A week in the hospital. And also they've been volunteering at a care home. So work experience, well, so they've got a pretty good application as far as I can see at the moment. Something I would, and this is just down to my personal experience. So I did a small amount of charity work, but something that really did boost my application was the fact I had a part-time job. So a lot of the time, we'll talk about how we've seen these skills, such as teamwork, communication, empathy, but not a lot of students are in positions where they're developing these skills. Because that's what you've also got to show. It's, I've seen this, but now I'm doing something about it, which is an important thing to be able to demonstrate. So if we look at strategic choices, okay, Leicester, we have to put this one at the top. I'm not saying it's the best. I'm not trying to sell my university in any way. But yet we do have quite a bit of a focus on the UCAT, which this student does incredibly well in. And as well as the GCSE focus, they do really, really well on that. And they would more likely get an interview from Leicester pretty straight away, as they would be exceeding the vast majority of candidates.
Sorry to interrupt here, Bailey. I just wanted to highlight one thing when I put these slides together for the students. The reason I put Leicester at the top is how I normally suggest to students, and I think Bailey does as well, is that you can gamble with one of the choices, especially if you are very highly performing and you're doing quite well. No university guarantees you an interview. And of course, there'll be some people, even I spoke to somebody today who was really worried about applying to Imperial, even though they had really high UCAT scores because they're very close to the threshold last year. But that's fine, as long as you strategically do it. Leicester is not the best, like Bailey said. I think you and I would agree on that, Bailey. They do lose a few points here because of the GCSEs and due to the UCAT. But with that being said, they still have a decent chance compared to previous years. And this might be the top choice for them if they want to really go to Leicester. But however, the other choices are incredibly easy compared to, the previous cutoffs, So that's where this is where the logic comes from. There's 2 ways you can do it. Completely apply to very easy choices. You're not bothered about where you're going. You just want to get in. That's one way. If you are somebody who wants to go a little bit to the more competitive universities, feel free to add in 1 or 2 really tricky ones, and the rest is easier ones. how I would recommend not doing it is going for very tricky ones just because you're chasing the prestige factor. There are some universities which are seen as very, very prestigious, like UCL or Cambridge or Oxford. When it comes to medical training, Bailey, you're in the fourth year of med school. You know this very well as well, that it doesn't matter which university you go to at all.
No, and I go to so at my medical school we share a lot of medical schools you'll find do share placement sites. And when I was at a shared site with one of the Oxbridge universities, I was told by staff nurses who, bearing in mind I was in third year of medical school at this point, I at Leicester was more prepared for clinical medicine than someone further down the line from Cambridge. So I would say that prestige for a medical school doesn't always mean that you're going to be as well, you're going to be a good doctor, but it doesn't mean that you're as clinically prepared, which is what you want to be, because you want to walk in on the ward on day one and know comfortably what you're doing.
I would also argue about the good doctor bit as well, actually, Bailey. When it comes to being a good doctor, there's many factors, and going to the university does not determine that whatsoever. If you look at the applications past F1, F2 for specialty training into different areas, a lot of the surgical fields, the very highly competitive ones, look at a few different things, such as whether or not you have any extra degrees, if you have a master's or a PhD level one, what research you have done, what teaching you have done, what kind of awards you have, conferences that you've attended, what kind of things you've been involved in overall as a medic, not which university. I don't think anywhere I've seen the university's name being specified as a point on those.
No, I've never heard of that either.
It's a huge shift because the GMC has now governed all the universities together, I think, and they're trying to make a very similar format to the curriculum through the UKMLA system. And that's where the key thing lies, that a lot of people, I get questions from, like, Plymouth's not a Russell Group university. Why should I apply there, for example? And it doesn't matter if it's Russell Group or not. That would matter if you were studying something like law, for example, where firms will then look at your prestige of the university, whereas that's not really true for medicine, is it?
No, God, no. I mean, you can get doctors from anywhere. But yeah, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, as long as I would say if it fits your lifestyle factors, then that's more important than the name of the university for medicine. So exactly. It doesn't matter if it's, I'm going to say it doesn't matter if it's towards the bottom of the league table, but it doesn't. But as long, let's say it's close to your family, and I'm trying to think of other things that might be good. It has a good local coffee. That's more important than going somewhere just because it's a swanky name on a jumper.
However, if you do want to go to a very good university like Imperial, there are positives to it. Obviously, you're in the middle of London, you've got very good opportunities to network, and there are pros to it as well. So whilst if you have the chance, I'm not deterring anybody who has really good academics, please do take your chances. But if you don't, I'm really just giving reassurance to those students who may not be able to get in. It's better to get into medical school and then, trying to aim for the highest ones. And by that, I see a lot of parents and a lot of students actually wanting to put down Oxford, UCL, Imperial, and then King's College, for example. I've had students in the past, and I think Bailey has that as well.
I've had a lot of them.
And where we do that, and then we end up seeing a lot of students going into taking a gap year. And that's because the interviews are also quite tough too. And you've got to factor that in as well. So
100%. If you can, I always say it's worth risking it for one biscuit. It's not worth risking it for four.
Exactly. And Bailey, if we were, for example, you and I were applying together and we're both very academically strong, we both applied to Imperial, and let's say there's 100 other of us, you're up against a very competitive set of people being interviewed. So you got to think the person next to you is also very well prepared. So at the interview, things do become a bit more tough as well, in that sense, that statistically, the odds are a little bit against you. Whereas with something like Plymouth, you might be somebody who's a very studious and very confident, well-rounded student. And sometimes, and this is generalizing a bit, but there is an element of those other students may not be as well prepared. and that could help you out a bit. But this is, again, a lot of speculation, and a lot of this is speculation, subjective opinions. However, we will I think what we'll do, Bailey, is we'll get to the Q&A section, if that's fine. There's lots of students asking me about graduate. We'll just quickly go over resits real quick, if that's fine. This is something I'm a bit of an expert in, so I'll just sort of explain. If you are resitting subjects, GCSEs generally do not matter, A-levels do. Two things to say about this one. Number one, if you have mitigating circumstances and you've had issues with family, issues with your personal health, or bereavement, make it known as soon as possible to school. Make it known as soon as possible to the med schools as well. People think of it as, they'll look at it negatively. They don't. They actually give you a very good chance. And medical school, they often urge you to let them know as soon as possible in case something happens. So if you resit subjects, it's not a bad thing necessarily, especially if you have those mitigating circumstances. Number two, some schools will let you do resits, such as in previous years, and this may not be the correct up-to-date policy, and you have to check the resit policies. Holyoke Medical School allowed the third subject, I think it was at least a C or a B that you needed in that, and if you resat that, you could still get in. So for example, if somebody got AA in biology and chemistry, but got a C in maths, they could have reset that maths to an A in and got in the next year. So there are ways around it. So you can resit subjects and get in. And Exeter as well again, a lot of policies have changed, and it's worth reading the most up-to-date stuff. But Exeter does not have a fixed sort of policy around that either. They will let you resit subjects. Is that right, Bailey? Anything to add there?
Yeah, I think, if I remember rightly, Newcastle also did allow it, but you do have to, they do adjust the threshold for that. So if you are resitting your third subject or a subject, it would go from the A being the standard, it would go up to an A star, which is easily attainable if you're resitting one subject and you're taking the whole year to do it. I think that's more than attainable. But again, I would echo what Ashir is saying about looking at the resit policies, because a lot of them are fairly reasonable. There are a few that are like, no, we don't want resits at all, but most of them are more than happy if you have a resit and if you've got a reason as well.
Generally, there has been times in certain years where if you have an offer, you've got, and this is when everyone applies and gets the offers. Let's say you've been offered A star AA, but then you maybe get 3 A's instead. And this is not unheard of, but some medical schools, if they have really liked your application, will be fine with it. But this is at their discretion. So, it depends on results day and the overall competition too. Anyways, Bailey, I've just got one quick thing to speak to the students about, which is the consultation that we run. We won't be able to go through case study 2 today, but again, like I mentioned, a lot of this information is readily available. If you want to speak to somebody like me or Bailey in our team, we have 4 or 5 experts who know the admissions data quite well, can get that information readily to you. And again, like I say, this is not something where we've got specialist information directly from the university that is gate kept from all of you guys. This is something that you can book. So if you are looking to book that with us and speak to somebody for some opinion, you can scan that QR code. There is a 10% off at the moment. So I'll leave that for you guys, if that's fine, and we will send you an email afterwards. This is something that could help if you are interested in speaking to somebody. Unfortunately, there is a small group of students who may not be to help, and that's if you have a very low UCAT score. And we try to be transparent with that. So if you get below, like in the first, second decile, there is probably very low chances of helping you essentially there. But if you are within the 4th, 5th or above, and you've got very good GCSEs or decent GCSEs, there is a chance. We do also explore things like graduate entry, things like reapplications and, sort of international students as well. I think somebody asked about CBSE, which is the Indian curriculum. Quick answer to that, it's a tough one. Half the universities consider it equivalent to A-levels, half of them don't. But we can go through that, and it's very easy to. We've got quick 5 minutes for some Q&A time. And before actually going to Q&A time, can I just ask you all to leave us some feedback, if that's okay? If you go to the next page, Bailey, please. There is a quick feedback form. This would be really, really nice if you can fill this in for us. We're choosing one student at random to just give that consultation to free or who has attended today. And if you can kindly, because me and Bailey put a lot of effort into this, to deliver it for you guys, And hopefully next week we'll be doing the same too. If you are happy to leave us a review on Trustpilot, we have left the link in the chat if any of you are happy to do that for us. And if you do leave a review, just please say hello or thank you or done or something like that in the chat. And yes, we will have more webinars for dentistry. So anybody who's applying for dentistry or veterinary science, we have some of those starting next week, which we'll send you emails about if you registered for this one. So we will be going into a lot more information because this is a big topic. Anyways, Bailey, we'll go over some Q&A, I think quickly for 5 minutes for everyone.
Yeah,
that's fine.
So I'm just going to start from what the first one that I can see.
Yeah.
So yes, all universities will generally have a document available like the statistics document. Most of them will. If you can't find it, there is normally the student room's quite good. It's certainly one that I've used over the years. If I'm struggling to find certain information, because sometimes people have put in a freedom information request, they've got the information and they've shared it on there. So that's always one to use. But make sure it is an official document and nothing too fishy. Widening participation is just basically people who would not traditionally get into medical school. So it often covers things like people from a lower income area. So areas that are not as affluent, don't have a high participation to university. If you have been in the care system or a care leaver, you've got asylum status, and like household income even comes into it. All of those sort of factors that would normally put someone at a lesser chance of going to encourage them to go. And what they'll often do is some universities offer scholarships for you, reduced offers to encourage you to go. If you want a good idea of a form, the best one that shows you all the criterion is the one from Anglia Ruskin. So if you just put in Anglia Ruskin widening access form, it's a pretty easy form to get your hands on, and it will show you all the relevant criteria. Is there for graduates, which would you recommend, the graduate route or undergrad to secure a place? I would say undergrad. It depends what your background's in. I mean, graduate entry is generally a lot more competitive because the course sizes are so small. So often the UCAT for a graduate entry course is so high, if you go to most of them, that it certainly becomes more of an aspirational, as I would tell students, that's an aspirational choice. That's what a normal grad course would be. But I, in my own cohort, have a lot of grads through the undergrad route. So, and it seems to be quite a good foundation, as graduate entry generally tends to push together the preclinical content into 1 year. So you learn 2 years of content in 1 year, and a lot of students find it very overwhelming. And that's from graduates that I know through various networking events as well. Which 10 subjects should a child be in year 10 focusing on? I would say all of them are important. I'd say if you've already chosen your options, make sure they're ones you're comfortable with. If there are ones that still use, I don't know if this is a thing anymore, but coursework. It was when I sat mine over a decade ago. And I picked ones that had a lesser assessment burden because of that. So if you do pick your subjects, pick them wisely, but generally try and focus on all of them equally. But don't not say don't worry, but always make sure that you've got the right support in the right areas, because some kids find maths and science easier than English. So it's just about trying to find the right support to put in place there to make sure that you all are there. But a lot of the time, medical schools will generally have a threshold. So you need to achieve at least the normal number, I think, is at least a 6 in maths and English is normally a minimum thing that you'll see, but you should generally try and be as high as possible. What is a good UCAT score? That's dependent. What you mean by good? I would say if you're scoring above the fifth, that if you're in the fourth decile and above, I'd say that's good. I would say that if you're in the top 20%, so 8th, 9th decile, I would say that's really, really good. Is anything above 2000 decent for a home student? I mean,
Just one thing, sorry to add into the scores, Bailey, sorry to interrupt there, is I think generally a good UCAT score will depend on your GCSEs quite heavily. So depending on what you've got, let's say you've got all 9s and 8s, a good score could even be with like in the top 40 or 50%, like Bailey said, you'll have a decent amount of options. However, it's getting incredibly competitive. So if you haven't sat your UCAT yet, or you're sitting it next year and the next 2 years, this is one of the exams to prioritize and score within the top 10 or 20%. It's easy to say, it's not as easy to do, but if you can get within that score range, it really maximizes your choices. I think in terms of the scores for UCAT, we can work with something a bit lower as well. Like this is one of the reasons why we actually have the consultation, right, Bailey? We have a lot of students every year, especially Bailey and I have. Bailey has spoken to a lot of students, perhaps, where they haven't got the highest scores and they're within the 40th, 50th decile, and they're a bit stuck. But we can always find some choices, and even if you are within that area, 1 or 2 interviews are more than enough to get the chances to get into medical school. So you can play your cards properly, and that's what we're trying to do here. I think we've got a lot of questions coming, Bailey, just now about, I think a lot of students are very interested in graduate entry, but we will definitely be covering that next week. So we will have a lot of information for students there, and we'll work through some examples if that's fine. And some of you have been asking about the documents as well. They take a while to find, but we will go through next week as well about some search terms of how to find them. And generally, if you look on the website closely, you will eventually find them. But this is something you should spend time. I think, Bailey, how long did you spend searching into this? I think perhaps, but interestingly enough, I was Bailey's tutor a few years back as well. So I think we spoke about this a few years ago as well, right, Bailey?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think, I hate to think about the amount of time I spent doing that. It was a long time. I mean, it was easier for me because I knew exactly what sort of thing I was after. So it's very quick and easy for me to rule out big chunks because I was like, that didn't fit certain things that I wanted. So I would really sit and think about what you want from a medical school and then look at the ones that leaves you.
Precisely, yeah.
Anyway, that's the easiest way to do it.
Got so much to go through next week as well, and thank you so much, Bailey. Bailey is one of the best tutors we have for university consultations. He has a breadth of knowledge behind this, and he'll be helping us next week as well, and we'll hopefully have more points to share with all of you. So unfortunately, we might not be able to answer all the questions today, but if you guys can please leave us that feedback and a review on Trustpilot, we heavily appreciate it. We'll hopefully see you guys next week. Anyways, if there are some undergrads applying, like still want to attend next week's session, please do. We will still be running through some case studies and some more examples next week for you guys, but we will focus on resets, graduates, gap year students, etc. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.